After Joe Biden's miserable first 2024 presidential debate, latest 2024 presidential forecast shows Donald Trump surging in his chances for the White House. In today's video, we'll take a look at the latest 2024 presidential forecast by FiveThirtyEight and talk about what it means for the 2024 presidential election. Here and welcome back to another video, Purple Political Talk here. Today is Monday, July 8th, 2024, and today we're going to be taking a look at the latest FiveThirtyEight presidential forecasts that have Donald Trump surging quite a bit. After the 2024 presidential debates we saw almost a couple weeks ago, and we're going to take a look at how the presidential race stands today, considering a lot of calls for Joe Biden to drop out of the race from people within his own party. And, all of the, the different effects of the debate. But before we do begin, I want to remind you to like, subscribe, and to turn on the notification bell so you're up to date with all of our 2024 presidential election content. So now, without a further ado, let's get started with the video. So, currently where we stand right now, we're seeing a really close election. We're going to have, the FiveThirtyEight forecast, the way it works is they run simulations of the election. And then the percentage chances of winning is just out of the 1,000 times that they run the simulation, they split up, percentage based on how many times each candidate wins. And I think what we can see from this forecast is this election can really turn out in any which way, and ultimately it's going to be those last couple of days that are going to have, the most tremendous impact on the race. And, overall, I think it boils down to that the race is going to be decided by 2, 3, maybe 4 states at most. And when we reach that point, the volatility and the possibility of, different outcomes just is a lot increased, and it's definitely a more profound, possibility that we see those different scenarios actually come to light. Now, here is, I think, the most interesting thing. Since the debate, and if we'll go down, and we'll go back up and, discuss it. But if you look at win probability, prior to the debate, Joe Biden had a slight, favorability, I guess, in winning the race. Very slight. We saw Donald Trump going up by, a couple of percentage points. Not a lot. Remember, these are percent chances of winning. I mean, I think even virtually like a 60-40 chance is still very, very considerably close, and the race could really go to anyone. But, we see Donald Trump coming from behind to now being ahead after the debate. And, I think the most interesting part about all of this is that, yes, I think that debate performance, Joe Biden did not do what he needed to do at that moment to really put away some of those concerns about his age. And I think, if anything, it really highlighted it. And going into this general election, I do think, not necessarily only the debate performance, but just other concerns about Biden's age are going to be, really, really, really big impact on his campaign. They're going to have a huge impact on his campaign as you're going into these very tight races in Wisconsin, in Michigan, in Pennsylvania, in the Sun Belt. And voters are not 100% confident of your ability to do and carry out the job as president. Now, I think things would look differently, and this race would be very different if Kamala Harris was the nominee. I do still think it would be close. I think that, inherently, Kamala Harris isn't necessarily the most favorable person in the Democratic Party. Definitely not the most loved out there, but, she brings in that youth, and it changes up the dynamics of the race. I think that with Biden's age problems and Donald Trump's insane amount of political baggage that, whether you agree with a lot of it or you don't, I think it's undeniable to say that, Donald Trump has a lot of political baggage over the years through a lot of different court cases, things that happened while he was president. All those different things and that political baggage is kind of also that factor that kind of, I think, tightens up this election. Because if this was any other presidential, if there was really any other Republican on the ticket that was not Donald Trump, I would say this race would be pretty much over. And I think the Democrats would have replaced Biden by this point already. And speaking of which, I mean, there's been talk about it on Capitol Hill, and amongst high level Democrats, that there is a possibility that Biden drops out. For all intents and purposes, Biden has pretty much said he is in till the end. And I think part of it has to do with his family really pushing him to stay in. But, I think going into the later stages of the race, the longer Biden waits to get out, if he's going to get out, the bigger impact it's going to have on this presidential election. But enough about, that kind of quick analysis on Biden's situation. Taking a look at the simulated electoral college victories, we're seeing, a traditional bell curve kind of telling us how close this election can and could be. And if you take a look at the different electoral vote scenarios, you kind of see, very skewed down in the middle, which tells us how close this election is currently right now, right? Later on, and really as we track this throughout the election cycle, as long as if you start seeing the peak of the curve start skewing to one candidate or another, that is more favorability that person wins. Right now, a lot of scenarios where we have, winning by one or two states. But let's take a look at a couple of the most recent national polls. Donald Trump has been consistently growing his lead on these national polls. And, I think these polls are very troubling for the Democrats. They're very troubling for the Biden campaign, because you need to go back and you need to look at the popular vote at the last couple of elections. Donald Trump has lost a popular vote, and very few polls in previous election cycles, Donald Trump has led the popular vote. Now, he's not only leading, he's leading by 6 points, 5 points, 4 points consistently. That paints a pretty troubled picture for the Democrats. And I think more than anything, one of the biggest things that it also could show you is when it comes to Joe Biden, we have to remember that he won in 2020 by give or take 100,000 votes put all together, or a little more than 100,000 votes. And a majority of those people were people who were independents, people who were in the middle. And, they kind of had their concerns mostly about Trump, but then, in some cases, like in the Sun Belt, lifelong Republicans that ended up voting for Joe Biden. But, Biden's base hasn't always been the most, like Biden's base in 2020 was really the never Trump movement. Now, Biden doesn't really have that excited base as Donald Trump does. In fact, many Democrats, especially, in certain factions of the party, are really against him. And I think that's the one big difference, that Biden's base is not as excited to go out to vote for Trump. I think if you can count on something, is that Trump's base is going to end up and go vote. And that might paint a bad picture for Biden and the Democratic Party. Mind you, I think it's important to note that some recent polls in recent election cycles have slightly overestimated Republicans, as pollsters have been trying to kind of fix their, I guess, polling methods as a result of the surprise victory in 2016. However, I think overall, you're still seeing a picture that is very strongly painted. In almost every single poll, without fail, except one where you have a tie, you see Donald Trump ahead. Now, here's something that I think is interesting. Let's take a look at the projected electoral votes. Recently, like, Donald Trump has not led this at all. And if he has, it's been a 269, 270 average electoral vote outcome. The way they do this is that they get all the simulations and they average out the votes. Now, if we take a look at this, Donald Trump has a slight advantage to the electoral vote map. And realistically, all these states that are outlined in black are going to be the states that end up choosing the election. And look, for example, in the Sun Belt, I think Donald Trump is a bit more safe as far as toss-up states. And realistically, it's all going to come down to these three Midwestern states, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. Now, where do I think right now, what's going to be the biggest challenge for Joe Biden going into the general election phase of this election? He's going to have to hold on to Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, all three of them. As you start losing one of these three, it's going to become increasingly difficult to create a pathway for the victory for the Democrats unless you replace them with other states, which, frankly, I do not see Joe Biden winning in Georgia. I do not see him winning in North Carolina. As of right now, things can definitely change, but the Democrats' only pathway to victory right now is in the Midwest. And if they're unable to, bring that in and close this gap, and if they're able to bring the momentum they have now and put it towards the general election, I think the Democrats are going to have a very tough election, at least at the presidential level, which is something that I think is really interesting. I think should be mentioned. A lot of Democrats' issues right now are at the presidential level. Down ballot, Democrats are overperforming Biden by 6, 7, 8 points. So if we applied those overperforming down ballot to, for example, these general presidential polls, we kind of are at the same place that we were in 2020. But as things stand right now, the Democrats really have to consider, is Biden the best way forward? Because honestly, if the Democrats had another nominee, Donald Trump is not someone that's easy to run against, but I think their chances would be increased. And I think, interestingly enough, for the Republicans, if Joe Biden drops out, you're going to have also immense political benefits, kind of that, political instability in the other parties. So overall, I think that's something that's interesting. Here you can see the closest states. We knew that it was going to be Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan. We also have the state of Nevada, which, I think Nevada can end up turning red at the presidential level this year, especially if Joe Biden fumbles it. And the fact of the matter is that for the Democrats right now, I guess winning Nevada isn't going to be as big of a priority. They're going to spend as much money there as they will spending, in the Midwest, because in some scenarios, they can afford to lose Nevada, although, if they're able to win the Midwest. And look at how close a lot of these races are. The lean Republican states are slightly, more out there percentage-wise, but these 4 states are almost all within a point and a half. So realistically, anything can happen. And look, here is the path to 270. Basically, for the Republicans at this point, they just need one. If they're able to win North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada, all that the Republicans need is to win, pick one, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, or Michigan, and you have the electoral map. You reach 270. And I think Donald Trump's pathway to the presidency is opening up a little bit. If you would have asked me right after 2020, do you think Donald Trump's going to win in a breeze and or going to be ahead in states like North Carolina and in states like Arizona and Nevada, easily in a couple months before the election, I would have told you no. I mean, these are states that trended Democratic. I think they're going to continue that trend, but I think these states are ultimately going to trend back to Donald Trump, and it's going to come down to the Midwest. I think everyone knew that going into this race. For the last couple of election cycles, the Midwest has been the decisive factor for these presidential elections, and I think that's what we should be expecting moving into November. But, that kind of covers everything from this forecast. I think more than anything, I think the big thing it highlights is how close this race currently is, and really the impact that little things such as, Biden's performance on the job, how those things could really have a big sway when it comes to this presidential election. But I want to know what you think down in the comments below. Do you think Joe Biden should drop out of the presidential race? Do you think this forecast is accurate? Do you think it's going to be this close of an election? I want to hear it all in the comments below. I want to thank you guys so much for watching today's video. If you enjoyed it, please give it a huge thumbs up. Remember to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell to be up to date for our latest 2024 election content. I'm sorry I couldn't post for the last couple of weeks. I had been really busy with some stuff for school, but I'm really happy to bring back to you, our consistent 2024 election posting. I'll see you guys in the next video, and goodbye.